Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be back safely and responsibly face-to-face again here. I'm joined by the woman to my right who needs no introduction, the Commissioner of the Department of Health, Judy Persichelli. To her right, another familiar face, the state's epidemiologist, Dr. Christina Tan. And to my left, a guy who needs no introduction, the Superintendent of the State Police, Colonel Pat Callahan. We're also joined by the Director of the Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, Jared Maples. Let's jump right in. We got a number of different topics to hit. We had a truly historic election day on Tuesday, and I think a historic election season. When all is said and done and counted, we will see the highest number of votes cast in any election in our state's history. So first and foremost, I thank every New Jerseyan who cast a ballot, whether you voted by mail or on election day, and regardless of who you voted for. Our civic society, our governmental institutions, and our democratic system are based on the votes of the people. And the more people participate in this process, the stronger each becomes. I also want to give a particular shout out and thanks to all the election workers, from the boards of elections and county clerks' offices to the local poll workers, members of the National Guard, and others who helped ensure a smooth election day and who continue to complete the counting of every ballot. Votes choose leaders. Leaders don't choose votes. As I've said, we don't have a complete count yet, but we expect that when all is done, well over 4 million New Jerseyans will have made their voices heard. Of course, it wasn't just the candidates for public office on the ballot, but also several important public questions. And by the way, I should say, Jared and I just chatted backstage, and Pat, I think will agree, very few glitches on election day, and very few glitches, frankly, in the entire election season, and that's very gratifying. So in addition to the persons who are on the ballot, we had several important public questions. One of those extended the constitutionally provided property tax deduction currently available to wartime veterans, extending that to all of our honorably discharged veterans. I was pleased to see that pass by a nearly 4-to-1 margin. I was on the phone, Pat, with a friend of ours, Joe Griffey's, on Saturday on his Welcome Home show, and I said, listen, when you're in the armed services, you don't make the decision about whether or not we're going to war or whether you're going to war. That gets made by other folks. You shouldn't have to pay a price for not being in a war. God bless you. If you're a veteran, you deserve equal treatment, and with that, we have solved that riddle. Also, public question number 1, the legalization of adult use marijuana, which passed by a more than 2-to-1 margin, and with support, I might add, from across the political divides. I anticipate that some of you here today will have the question as to where we go from here. But let me state simply that for me and for so many others in our administration and across the state, this is a matter of social justice, racial justice, economic justice, and at the end of all of that, flat-out common sense. I am proud that New Jersey is now joining the other states which have similarly come to recognize that our outdated marijuana laws really ended up doing little more than sending predominantly black and brown, mostly young men, to jail, and thereby limiting their potential and harming our communities and in some cases changing their lives for the rest of their lives. I look forward to working with the legislature to swiftly pass enabling legislation that will set up a regulatory framework for adult use marijuana. And as a reminder, until we enact that enabling legislation, recreational marijuana remains illegal under our state law, as Attorney General Gurbir Grewal noted yesterday. Yet, as the Attorney General also noted, both prosecutors and law enforcement have very broad discretion to handle low-level marijuana offenses. Next up, it's a Thursday, so earlier today, the Department of Labor in our state, at the federal level and around the country, released the latest weekly unemployment numbers. Last week, roughly 24,700 workers submitted an initial claim for unemployment benefits. That's a decrease of more than 2,500 from the prior week and the third consecutive week of decline. Tell that to one of the people who file for unemployment insurance. That will give them little solace. But still, Overall, 1.7 million New Jersey workers have filed a claim since March, and more than 1.46 million workers have met the monetary requirements to receive benefits. Boy, this is one huge glaring area, and please God, we don't wait till either this administration re-ups or a new federal administration comes in office. We need federal stimulus at many levels, especially for the folks who are unemployed. They deserve that continued bridge that works so effectively in the spring into the summer that has been taken away from them. All totaled, more than $18.4 billion has been released to our unemployed and underemployed workers. As always, I want to thank Commissioner Robasero Angelo and his team for all they have done and will continue to do in helping our working families receive their benefits. Also on the labor front, the executive order that I signed last week to provide mandatory health and safety standards to further protect all of New Jersey's workers during this pandemic takes effect today. In fact, it took effect, I believe, at 6 a.m. this morning. So I encourage all workers and all employers to visit our main website, covid19.nj.gov, and look for the /safe page to learn more about the order and what it means. Additionally, that page is being updated today with a link to report a workplace which is not in compliance with the executive order, and Mahan tells me that that is in fact up and running. So that was part of the executive order. We promised a link that you could go to and fill out a complaint if your employer was not following the obligations that are very clearly laid out in this executive order, whether it's providing masks, 6 feet minimum social distancing, breaks to wash your hands with soap and water, etc. Again, I want to thank everybody, the employers, the overwhelming amount of whom have been doing and continue to do the right thing, and our brothers and sisters in labor, especially the Protect NJ Workers Coalition, for their partnership. With that, Judy, I'm going to turn to the overnight numbers, if it's okay with you. We are reporting an additional 2,104 positive cases, bringing our cumulative total of cases since March 4th to 247,219. Bergen, Essex, and Passaic counties are each reporting more than 200 cases today. Camden, Hudson, Middlesex, Monmouth, and Union are each well over 100. Over the past 3 days, since we last came together on Monday, although it was virtual, we have recorded, Judy, 6,408 cases in those 3 days. The positivity for all tests recorded on Sunday, November 1st, and as we said the other day, there's usually a little bit distortion up, down, or otherwise on the weekends, but the positivity is unacceptable, 7.74%. And by the way, you're seeing new temporal frames on our charts, because we're very happy to go back and join with you in great pride at how we cracked the curve in the spring into the summer. But these are now from the 1st of August on, because that's really, frankly, right now, the more appropriate time frame for us to be looking at. Today, where are we? Okay, statewide rate of transmission currently stands at 1.26. Mahan, is that also since August 1? It is, right? Okay. Looking at our schools, by the way, interesting story here. Our tracking dashboard has been updated, as we do every Thursday, to report all new cases which are confirmed to have been from the instances of in-school transmission over the prior week. This week, we're reporting 24 additional individuals who have are cases stemming from 8 newly confirmed instances of in-school transmission. So that gives us, and this is a cumulative number, right? So this is not what's happening every week. That gives us, on the left column, a total of 36 cases of in-school transmission since school opened. That's now a couple of months, impacting 146 individuals. There are, just to give you a quick sense, 5, I'm giving you the high counties because it's hard to read this, 5 in-school transmissions in Bergen, 6 in Camden, 4 in Ocean, still no cases of all this, not from COVID. She also lost her brother. We thank Reuven for his years of service to his community, and may his memory be a blessing. Next up, we recall Patterson, look at that handsome guy, Patterson's Randolph, Randy Stewart. He was 67 years old, too young, when COVID took him away from us. Born and raised in the Silk City, Randy was a trained water purification specialist who served with the 50th Armored Division of the New Jersey National Guard based out of Teaneck. He would later serve as an officer at the Passaic County Juvenile Detention Center before becoming Sergeant of Security for Passaic County Probation and Child Support Services. Randy was known for the kindness he showed and was noted for providing coloring books and snacks for the children he served as they waited with their parents. Randy leaves behind his daughter, Bree, who lives in Miami, with whom I had the great honor of speaking earlier this week, and Randy's fiancée, Elsa. He's also survived by his brothers, Ozzie, Victor, and Jerry, and their families, including 15 beloved nieces and nephews, and he leaves behind a great many friends. I would have said that he left behind his sister Olivia, but COVID took her in September, and I believe next Monday we will be honoring Olivia here. We thank Randy for his service, and may God bless him and watch over him and his family. And finally for today, we travel to Vineland in Cumberland County to remember the guy in the middle there, Frank Laredo. Born and raised in Vineland and a graduate of Vineland High, Frank served in the United States Navy during the Vietnam War. When he returned home, he embarked on a career in construction, working as a project manager for several general contractors. In his retirement, Frank returned to the water as a credentialed merchant mariner and boat captain for Cape May's iconic Tiny Cruise Line. Frank was also a volunteer firefighter serving with the North Vineland Fire Company No. 3 for 30 years and with the New Jersey Forest Fire Service for over 5 decades. He might have been one of the guys, if this had happened a couple of decades ago, Pat, that we sent out to California. He lived his life by what became known as Franco's Rules, which required he spend time doing the things he loved, especially fishing, cooking, and entertaining his family and friends. Frank is survived by his daughters Renee and Michelle, and I had the great honor of speaking with Michelle earlier in the week, and his son-in-law, Michelle's husband, David, along with his 2 grandsons, Max and Henry. He also leaves his sister Loretta, nephew Thomas, niece Maria, and great-niece Jillian, and numerous other cousins. A tremendous life indeed. We thank Frank for his service to our nation and his community, and we know he is somewhere where Franco's rules are still the order of the day. So Reuben, Randy, and Frank are just 3 more among the more than 16,400 New Jerseyans we have lost to date. For them and for all of our families, we must recommit to doing all that we can to slow the spread of this virus and to save every life we can. So that's simple stuff. Wear your mask. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Social distance. Take yourself off the field if you don't feel well or you've been exposed. Use common sense. These are the things we need to do now just as much as we needed to do them last spring. They crushed the curve once, and we could do it again, but only if we all make that commitment. And by the way, common sense includes not traveling outside of New Jersey for the time being, unless you have to cross state lines for work or school, for worship or some other essential travel. And as we know, and Judy and I have spoken to this many times, Thanksgiving is just 3 weeks away. So I encourage everyone to follow the CDC's guidelines and plan for a smaller dinner with your immediate household, family only. We do not want anyone's Thanksgiving to lead to more cases of COVID-19. Remember, public health creates economic health. It happens in that order. For us to get to the stronger, fairer, and more resilient New Jersey when this pandemic ends, we need to take action right now. Speaking of economic health, I'd like to take a minute before I turn things over to Judy to highlight another small business that has partnered with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority to maintain their place in our community. This is, and we're going to bring him up now, Harshil Patel, owner of the Honest Restaurant in Edison, one of the 5 New Jersey locations for the family-owned Indian restaurant chain that started out as a food cart in the streets of Ahmedabad in Gujarat, India. And literally, you can't make this up, I was in that town a year ago last month. To help cover expenses throughout the spring when the pandemic was at its height, Harshil worked with the EDA to secure an emergency grant to cover expenses. And today, Harshil and his team continue to serve their loyal customers. Harshil came to the United States a decade ago and is building his American dream right here in New Jersey. And I'm proud that our state is where so many come, and we wish him nothing but the very best going forward. By the way, swing by Honest Restaurant. I'll give you the address right now. Judy and Pat, you got to stay for the rest of the presser, but 1681 Oak Tree Road in Edison. 1681 Oak Tree Road in Edison. Check it out. It's fantastic food. And that's where we'll leave things for today. And again, thanks to everybody who made sure that your voice was heard on Tuesday or leading up to Tuesday, regardless of how you voted or for whom you voted. The important thing is that we send a clear message that our democracy is stronger when everybody participates and when every vote is counted. With that, please help me welcome the woman who needs no introduction, the Commissioner of the Department of Health, Judy Persichilli.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. Well, along with the rest of the nation, cases of COVID-19 continue to increase in our state. The country reached an alarming milestone yesterday with more than 100,000 cases reported in one day, the highest since the epidemic began. Many states are also seeing record cases and severe strains in their hospital capacity. Top health leaders have cautioned that they expect the situation in the states to get worse as the weather gets colder and more people gather inside. As I have said before, this virus has not taken a break, and we cannot either. Pandemic fatigue is a real threat to containing COVID-19. In New Jersey, we continue to use our hotspot teams to work with local health departments to reduce transmission. As you know, our hotspot teams have been working with local health officials in 9 counties, including Atlantic, Bergen, Essex, Gloucester, Hudson, Middlesex, Monmouth, Ocean, and Union, and 4 major cities, including Atlantic City, Elizabeth, Lakewood, and Newark, and several universities, including Rutgers University, Rowan University, and Monmouth University. Our hotspot teams monitor the situational reports to examine trends in new cases, testing, and other disease progression metrics. When a county shows increases in these metrics, we collaborate with that county for further investigation. During this investigation, the team looks at several metrics and indicators to get a more focused picture. We look at percent positivity and number of people tested within each municipality. We review cases by age groups, gender, and race and ethnicity. We talk to the local health departments and get detailed information on the cases and outbreaks reported from schools, sports teams, long-term care facilities, businesses, colleges and universities, faith-based organizations, and other settings. Using this information, we identify potential sources of the hotspot, geographically, industry, culturally, or otherwise. Once we identify a specific hotspot, we coordinate enhanced activities and deploy any resources needed in 4 key areas: testing, contact tracing, isolation and quarantine, and health, education, and community engagement. Last week, I outlined our efforts in Lakewood and progress in reducing the spread of COVID-19 there. We recently shifted our focus to the northeast part of the state, where several counties have emerged as new hotspots. In Essex County, for example, we've identified Newark as a hotspot. Their current 7-day average case rate is 40 cases per 100,000, and their percent positivity is 12.3%, which is the highest rate in Essex County. Similar to Lakewood, we are working with the Newark Department of Health and city officials to deploy rapid test kits and pop-up testing sites to increase the contact tracing workforce, including recruitment of bilingual contact tracers. We're identifying isolation and quarantine facilities for persons who are experiencing homelessness and individuals who are unable to isolate or quarantine at home. We're partnering with community groups and faith-based leaders to maximize testing among residents, and we're translating materials into Spanish and Portuguese. As New Jersey is experiencing increasing community spread, we have to be steadfast in practicing our precautionary measures to protect our health and the health of others. Even when we are with our loved ones and friends, we need to mask up, social distance, wash hands frequently, and use hand sanitizer to reduce the risk of transmission. While we are seeing cases related to activities such as sports or school or daycare and workplaces, the majority of our cases are not easily traced back to a single exposure and are likely related to routine gatherings in places such as your homes. As the state, we have been working together for more than 8 months to prevent the spread of COVID-19. We have adapted to new protocols, and we've all adapted to new ways of life. We must continue to practice our preventive measures. Get tested if you've been exposed. Cooperate with the contact tracers. And please download the COVID New Jersey Alert app. These are the tools we have available to us to contain the virus. They're the only tools we have right now, and we need everyone to take these steps to keep our state safe. Moving on to my daily report, as the governor shared, our hospitals are reporting increasing hospitalizations with a census of 1,224 of COVID-positive patients and persons under investigation, and 36%, 238 of those individuals are in critical care, and 36% of those critical care patients are on ventilators. Just short 7 weeks ago, that number on a 7-day rolling average was 420. Today it's 1,224. There's one new report of multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, so there are now 61 total cases in our state. The children affected have either tested positive for COVID-19 or have antibody tests that were positive, suspecting a COVID-19 exposure. In New Jersey, thankfully, there are no deaths reported at this time. The children are between the ages of 1 and 18. The breakdown of race and ethnicity is white 20%, black 33%, Hispanic 36%, Asian 6%, and other 6%. The breakdown of our deaths by race and ethnicity overall are white 54.1%, black 18.1%, Hispanic 20.2%, Asian 5.5%, other 2%. At the state veterans' homes, there is one additional positive resident in the Paramus home who has tested positive. All appropriate infection prevention strategies are in place. At our state psychiatric hospitals, 6 new cases have been identified at Ancora Hospital. And again, all appropriate infection prevention strategies are in place. As the governor shared, we have one of the highest percent positivities we've experienced in quite some time in our state as of November 1st of 7.74%. The northern part of the state is 8.71%, the central part of the state 7.32%, and the southern part of the state 6.47%. So that concludes my daily report. As always, stay safe, and remember, for each other and for all of us, please take the call and download the COVID Alert NJ app. Thank you.
So, Judy, just to put a magnitude on this, 7 weeks ago, the number of hospitalizations versus today it's 3 times, almost exactly.
Yeah.
So it's pretty clear what we're in the midst of here, right? Thank you for everything. As always, thank you especially for pointing out the inequities across racial lines, especially. Can we assume, by the way, Judy, you or Tina, I haven't asked this in a long time, the number of child inflammatory syndrome cases is now up by 1 to 61. No fatalities. I'm knocking on wood, as I always do. The assumption, I think I've got, and I assume everyone has, is that these kids have gotten better over time. That there's not 61 kids today who are sick. That this is it rolls through these kids. Is that fair to say?
Every child has a different course. We have to look at this as a very serious complication of COVID-19. Not everybody has an easy course, and we can't just lump them and say everybody, does great. And if I can actually add that, a similar phenomenon has been described among adults as well. So there's also the syndrome described in adults.
Well said. I just want to make sure folks, each kid deals with this differently. Each adult does, to your point, Tina. But that we don't have, at any moment in time right now, we don't have 61 kids with the same level of concern. Judy, thank you, and Tina, thank you. Pat, great to have you as always. The weather is good, so that's one we don't have to, we can take off our list at least for today. Unseasonably warm and sunny for the next couple of days. Anything on compliance? Anything on the ranks of the troopers, which God willing will expand as we speak, and any other updates? Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. A brief executive order compliance report. On November 2nd, Chatham Township Police responded to a private residence. It was a large house party. The owner was cited for not only an EO violation, but also underage drinking summonses were issued. And to your point with regard to the bolstering the ranks of the state police, and thanks to you and your office, we'd had the 161st State Police class report Monday morning to Seagirt, 203 recruits. In a time when a lot of people question why would you ever want to do that job. So it's inspiring to see young men and women that are still ready to come out and serve the citizens of New Jersey. They have a long road ahead of them. I thank also the National Guard, who was able to dedicate additional buildings and space to us, which allows us to adhere to social distancing in the training, both in the classroom, self-defense, various mitigations that we put in there, including testing. Out of all that reported, 1 out of 203 tested positive and had to be sent home and deferred to the next class. So it'll be constant monitoring of both the class and the instructors. And to your point, Governor, I hope as many come across that stage and get their badge a few months from now. And so thank you for that. That's all I have.
Fantastic. And by the way, a class of 203 with great, I think, record levels of diversity. I believe that's correct.
That is correct, yes.
And that's been a big initiative, I know, for you and the Attorney General and your colleagues, so hats off to you. Congratulations to each and every one of them. May God watch out for them, and may they get through, as many of them get through as possible, and can't wait to be at the graduation when they come through. I think we'll start with Dustin. Before we do, I think we're on we're back to the schedule. As you know, we sort of went to remote Facebook live transmission for a couple of weeks. We reviewed the setup in this room. It was re-cleaned from top to bottom. The spacing, the way that we're gathering, we think is responsible and safe. And so unless something happens to one of us or one of you in the room, God willing that does not happen, we'll probably continue this way, and we'll stay on the Monday, Thursday in-person schedule, and then be with you electronically in between. If the numbers continue to go in the wrong direction, I suspect we may be seeing you more frequently, and I hope that does not happen. But with that, so we'll see you Monday here at 1 o'clock unless you're otherwise electronically between now and then. Dustin, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You said yesterday that Democrats' strong outcomes around the state were due to progressive politics and governing. How do you square that with Amy Kennedy struggling and maybe not winning, as we know it now, in the 2nd Congressional District? Do you think that's in any way a referendum on you and that you are viewed as too progressive for that district? Do you have any update on whether there have been or will be law enforcement actions against any of the people involved in that Trump caravan on the Parkway? And there's been a large increase in reports during the pandemic of online child abuse and exploitation, and I want to know if you'd be willing to join other states that dedicate state funding towards task forces that investigate these crimes, because even with federal money, they're underfunded and under-resourced, especially in the pandemic. Thanks.
Thanks, Dustin. On the third one, the answer conceptually has to be yes. The premise for your question is completely accurate. The incidence of child abuse online, there's no question, has gone up, continues to go up, and if we can figure out a smart way to coordinate and approach that with fellow states, you betcha. I don't have any update on the law enforcement as it relates to the Parkway, Pat, unless you do.
At this juncture, no summonses have been issued.
Nothing to report there, Dustin. With the specifics of the Amy Kennedy, Jeff Van Drew race, that one is yet to be called. It's the only, I believe, correct, this is the only federal seat on the ballot that is yet to be called. And so I know it's a tight race, but I've got no insights as to right now whether or not I played a role or didn't play a role, but I will just say this. Let me just go through a couple of realities that makes the case that pro-growth, progressive politics are what resonates as they should with the state right now. Somerset County, complete sweep of freeholders and constitutional officers. A very competitive race in LD 25, which has been historically a Republican. I'm not saying this to be partisan, this is the facts. Yet to be called, but very competitive in what has been a Republican bastion. Very competitive freeholders in Morris County. Historic results in Hunterdon County, including at the community level in places like Flemington and Clinton. A sweep in Mount Laurel, victory in Evesham. Literally, there is evidence. One of our colleagues, we think, may have won a seat on the town committee. Do we have Stanishi's results yet?
He's ahead.
He's ahead?
Yes.
All right. Dante makes his first appearance behind the mic in these past 8 months. We're competitive in Greenbrook, which these are places that we don't normally compete. So let's wait and see how the Amy Kennedy, Jeff Van Drew race comes out, but there's evidence all over the place. And we're not patting ourselves on the back, but I want to make sure that we make the point that that there's a harmony between the policies that we both campaign on and pursue at all levels of the ballot, not just me, and what people in our state want. And I think the evidence yesterday or 2 days ago, was overwhelming. By the way, there's a lot of these races that have yet to be called. And so I say LD 25 is competitive. It's far from called. Freeholder, we got a competitive freeholder race in Morris County, yet to be called. And that's par for the course, given the model that we had, mail-in ballots and provisionals. The provisionals, by the way, I want to make sure I say this accurately. I think I said the opposite of this the other day. Provisionals can't get counted until we're past the date of when we allowed a properly postmarked mail-in ballot to have been received. So that means the election was on November 3rd. We gave that until November 10th for a ballot to come in that was postmarked by the 3rd. Provisionals then start counting on the 4th, because only then can you compare Pat Callahan did or didn't send a ballot in by mail, so we can count his provisional ballot. I think we have to finish counting on November 20, Paramount, and certify when?
So we do have to finish counting by November 20th and certify by that date. I would just note that provisional ballots can begin being counted on November 11th after the November 10th deadline.
Yep. If I didn't say that, I meant that. So November 10th is your deadline, then you wake up on the 11th and start to count the provisionals. Yet that count has to stop on November 20th, and we have to certify the election on that date, and that ultimately feeds into the Electoral College. I'm not just saying this because it's convenient in places like Pennsylvania and Georgia and Nevada and Arizona, but just like those places, New Jersey's going to count every single ballot, and that's what we should be doing all around the country, and that's what we normally do. Colleen, is that you back there? Can we do Colleen and Matt? We'll come back down to you right after that.
Hi, thanks, Governor.
Hi.
I have a few election questions. Do you have an update of the number of mail-in ballots received? You've been giving us that every day. I didn't know if you had one today. Do you know why the ballot tracker is not going to be updated until the 20th with the status of your ballot? It's just going to say received until then. A lot of people are questioning if, there is a problem and maybe the mail is not getting the cure letter to them on time, they might miss that opportunity. From election officials that we've talked to who've talked about things that might be improved or, some things that were difficult, they said that if they'd had more time this year, they think they could have, maybe it could have been a smoother election. I'm wondering if you agree that we should have, set this up earlier, made the call earlier. And then finally, I know you said there were not a lot of glitches, but we have heard of a number. There were disabled people who said they couldn't vote on a machine. There were 3 polling locations in Newark that didn't open until after 7 o'clock. There was another one in Newark where the doors were kept locked, they said for security's sake, and so people had to bang on the doors, and often they said that no one heard them, so they couldn't get in.
Were they trying to get out or get in?
I think they were trying to get in to vote. So especially when you look at a place like Newark where you have social justice concerns, I know that the counties run elections, but is this something that the state might look to investigate? And how do you prevent things like this from happening in the future?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so the mail-in ballot, Mahan will correct me if I'm wrong, has passed 4 million. So it's over 4 million. We'll come back to you. Mahan will give you the exact number. I don't have a good answer on the tracker not being updated until November 20. Parimal, do you have an answer to that? If not, we'll come back to you, Colleen, with it.
We'll come back to you on that one.
Yeah, bear with us on that. So hang in there. More time. I'll tell you, there's one fix to my way of thinking that addresses both, and there are always glitches, and the Newark situation got cured. I know there were lines in Hudson County. They got cured by 10 or 11 in the morning. And then you asked about whether more time would have helped. We gave a lot of time, I have to say. I admit to you, because we were at the height of the pandemic, we gave less time for the primary, but we deliberately made a call, I believe in early to mid-August, to give county clerks a fairly long runway, and I'll acknowledge that I've heard the same stories about the early morning challenges in Newark, and as I mentioned, there were lines, I know, in Hudson County. Here's what my fix. We're going to review all this. We'll do a postmortem, as we did with the primary. And this obviously hinges to a great degree on whether or not we're still fighting a pandemic, so let's put that aside for a minute. The one thing that I want that would address a lot of this, and it requires some amount of investment, is early in-person voting. So the mail piece looks like it worked really well. The day of looks like it worked really well. But I'd like to see us get in-person early voting, make the investments in the electronic roll books, and allow folks to vote by machine when they're voting in person, either early or on election day. Again, still have a mail component, which worked really well. But adding that with the investment that goes with it, I think would, our hope is, and it has been since day one, is to open up democracy. Folks who are on parole or probation having the right to vote. 17-year-olds at the time of the primary, as long as they turn 18 by the general election, allowing them to vote in the primary is something that we've done. Online registration, where we had a huge success this year. I'd love to add in-person early voting to that. It requires an investment, but you'd then do away with the provisional balloting that we had to live with this year because we couldn't get the investment done in time. Again, all that's subject to whether or not we're in the throes of a pandemic, which God willing we won't be in the years to come, but that's my sort of magical configuration. Thank you for that. We'll come back to you on the tracker. Matt, good afternoon.
Governor, for people who didn't certify for the $300 benefit and will be able to do it in the second round, do you know when the second round will be open and when people could see money deposited into their accounts? On COVID, what have you, when half of the counties in the state reporting more than 100 cases, when does the hotspot approach become more of a statewide hotspot problem? And the current rolling average of new cases is up 26% from a week ago and 230% from the average a month ago. So it's about the same where it was in early May when we were on the downslope of the first wave, and we still had a lot of these restrictions in place. So how close are you to ordering new restrictions based on this based on the increase in cases and hospitalizations, and if not, why, given the trend? And quickly from Dan Munoz, what's as soon as someone could go into a shop and buy legal cannabis? We're hearing it could be upwards of a year. And you mentioned the AG's reminder in your remarks that he sent out yesterday. Given the social justice piece that you've advocated heavily on and the fact that voters have already spoken, are you okay with him saying that? Will you call on him to put out a directive in your capacity of what you can do to stop prosecutions and arrests?
Matt, on the $300 benefit, I don't have a crisp answer for you. Mahan, can we get to Rob Sarangelo and get to Matt on that? I'm going to combine your question on, I think you had, if I'm reading this, with COVID over 100 in more than at least half the counties, and then you also said the rolling averages are up meaningfully. How close are we to doing something? Close. So bear with us. We will clearly be taking action. And I hope it will be action that balances all the various challenges and interests that we have. But right now we've had really good success, and Judy's led it with the hotspot teams. It's worked and it's working. That will continue without question. So that doesn't, just because it's up everywhere doesn't mean that isn't effective. We're deploying testing, tracing, enforcement, the whole shooting match. But we're looking at a number of different steps that we're going to need to take. And so bear with us on that. On Daniel, could it take up to a year? I think it could. The medical establishments would like to be able to expand their operation sooner than that. And that's something that I know, this is all pending legislation that's being worked on, and establishing the commission and beginning to name commissioners and executive directors, and that all of that will begin to happen at least sooner than later. Could the medical establishments, as you likely know, have to prove that they are not eating into, no pun intended, their supply for the medical purposes, that they've got excess capacity, and that's something that is clearly on the table, and that could theoretically happen sooner. And I saw what the Attorney General said, and I hope there's a lot of weight on the word discretion. So there's a wide discretion associated with actions that could be taken, and I hope that is the reality. I said to Mahan earlier, my wife's uncle was killed in World War II, 8 days to go in the war, when it was quite clear that it was only a matter of days till the war was ending. And I want to avoid, if humanly possible, we want people to abide by the law. And that, again, that's not my job. That's Pat's, the Attorney General's, other members, prosecutors, other members of law enforcement. That's their responsibility. But I do hope that in the spirit of what happened on Tuesday, that we have, and the Attorney General has said this to his credit, that discretion is the word of the day. Thank you. Anything, sir?
Yeah, just one. New Jersey voters approved ballot question 3 to delay redrawing legislative districts if census results are delayed. Is your hope that the state gets the count on time, or would you prefer the state hold off on redrawing districts? Some who oppose the question say this constitutional amendment is a permanent fix to a temporary problem. What is your response to that?
My hope is that we get an accurate census count, and I still bemoan the fact that the Trump administration stopped us from counting on what would have been the full clock. And so that's I care a lot more about that than it's not that I don't care about redistricting, but I care overwhelmingly about an accurate census count. And I bemoan the fact that I think we got cut off on October 6th, does that sound right? With 25 days still left on the clock. I don't know why, and I can speculate why, but that is, that's not a positive step. And so that's my bigger focus, frankly. I don't view it necessarily permanent or otherwise. I think it's given, in fact, I don't view it permanently at all. This is a pandemic, census being conducted in the midst of a pandemic, which led to that question being raised. But again, my overwhelming focus is on getting the right count. Thank you. Hey, Dave.
Hi, Governor. By the way, thank you for returning back to the in-person update. Judy, you look great today. You look good in the virtual, but you look great today. So.
Pat and I will just mail it in today.
No, you guys look good too. Governor, you had announced
shame you into saying that, Dave. I just want the record.
You had announced the complaint form is being put up on the website today. It was not up this morning, so that's good news for everybody. Yep. But if you have a complaint, could you go through what the process is? Are the Department of Labor inspectors calling a business owner if a complaint's been made? Are they sending them a letter? Do they show up in person? Do they go with law enforcement? How does this work? And if the inspectors do go in person, do they have the right legally to enter a workplace location without a search warrant? In other words, what happens if they show up and the owner of the business says, yeah, thanks, you can't come in. Some initial questions were raised about the mail-in voting, but overall, I think the system really worked quite well. A lot of people said that. You'd mentioned we're expecting more than 4 million mail-in ballots when all is said and done.
In fact, it's already over 4.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you think that the mail-in voting system could be used primarily next year? Do you like it? Is it the wave of the future? You know, I know you had mentioned early in-person voting as well, but moving forward, what would have to happen? Would the legislature have to take action to make this our primary voting system? Because it seemed to work quite well overall. And last question, how confident are you and the commissioner and the epidemiologist with regard to the hotspot team stopping the pandemic from spiraling out of control, because these numbers keep going up and up and up? Thank you.
All good questions. I don't have a specific answer on the, you're right, it was not up this morning. It is now up. So it's covid19.nj.gov/safe. And I'd like to come back to you and answer your first question, Dave. We'll get Mahan to come to you in terms of how the Department of Labor actually, how they follow up. I suspect, without knowing the answer, I suspect it is consistent with any complaint they would have received about a workplace condition. This is now a very specific element of that workplace condition, which we haven't been dealing with before. And by the way, most industries and most employers, to their credit, have been doing the right thing. As usual, most folks do the right thing, and you just got to bring a few more of them along who are acting in a non-compliant way. I think you're absolutely right. The mail-in process was a big success. Having said that, I'd like it to be my perfect world. And again, bear with us while we do a complete and thorough post-mortem. I kind of addressed this already to Colleen's question, but I do want to reiterate it. I personally want to get back to machine voting, but we need an investment in an electronic poll book, is what folks call it colloquially, that would allow us to have side-by-side mail-in ballots, in-person early voting, and same-day, election day voting. That does require legislation. It does require an investment. I don't have a crisp number for you. I think it's plus or minus in the $20 to $30 million range, but it's a one-time investment. That to me is, that creates that's the idea. This is in addition to the other steps we've taken: parole, probation, 17-year-olds, online registration. If you had that electronic poll book, you could be aggressive, continue to be aggressive on mail-in voting. You could allow in-person early, and you'd have same-day, either in-person or same-day election on machines. Because I know that the whole notion of voting by paper is a bone in some people's throat. It isn't in mine, but I understand why it is. And that to me is the perfect constellation. We'll come back to you in the Department of Labor if that's okay. But again, I suspect it's following up as they do on any workplace condition matter. With that, a quick drink. Oh, sorry, hotspots. I think what, Judy, tell me if you, I apologize for that. I believe we are going to migrate sooner than later, and I can't promise you when or how that will look. Hotspot teams will continue to be center stage, but I think we collectively, all of us, think we need to augment that with some broader steps. Is that a fair statement? It's not either or?
It's not either or.
Yeah, so bear with us on that. But they will continue to be, it's working. We've got evidence that it's, when Judy sends them in, it actually works. And by the way, there's a compliance piece that goes along with that. So when she's plussing up testing, tracing, public service announcements in multiple languages if need be, there's also eyes on the ground at both the state level and local level. Sorry, I forgot that. I'm going to mask up, if that's all right. Thanks, everybody. Good to be back in the room. Again, expect that we'll continue to be doing this as long as we can do it safely and responsibly. Again, we're going to count every single vote in New Jersey, and we're going to count every single vote in America. That's the way it has to be. It's the way it's always been and always must be. And let the chips fall where they may. And we'll keep you posted as we go through the next couple of weeks in terms of those counts in New Jersey. Again, I salute everybody. A really successful election season, win, lose, or draw. It appears to work. I've already mentioned a couple of tweaks that we'd like to see, and we'll work with our legislative colleagues to get to that place. I want to thank Judy and Tina on the right, Pat on the left, Jared, Mahan, the whole team. Folks, please fight through that fatigue. Please fight through that fatigue. We got a good fact right now. In the next few days, it's nice out. It's nice weather. It's in the 60s. It's sunny. Folks, try to do as much of your life for the next few days outdoors. That alone would help us, right? That would be, let's use this when we have it, as opposed to that miserable, cold, rainy stretch that we came through. But most importantly, fight through the fatigue. We've done it before, folks. You've done it before. We will do it again. Many thanks, everybody. God bless.